Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you guys had a great weekend. Today, we're going to talk about Mercury squaring Neptune. So, Mercury is in Sagittarius right now. And between today and Wednesday, you'll really be feeling the effects of Mercury's square to Neptune in Pisces. It perfects tomorrow, but you can feel it today. Probably could have felt it over the weekend. And you should be feeling it probably through midweek. So that's what we're going to take a look at today. But there's a lot of other big things coming up this week. For example, Venus is making its first big conjunction with Pluto this week prior to turning retrograde. So we're going to talk about that. And there's some other things too that we'll get into as the week goes on. We are definitely starting to get into the interesting part of December. And if you didn't already have a chance to listen to last week's content and the week before in terms of laying out the major astrology of December, make sure you do so. It's a huge month astrologically. I think there's a lot to look forward to this month. But we started off our current moon cycle with an eclipse, for example. You should probably go back and check that out if you haven't yet. If you want some previews on Jupiter moving into Pisces, Venus's retrograde, and more, then you want to check out some of the videos I did 2 weeks ago. Just a lot of big astrology this month. All right. Well, anyway, before we dive in, I want to remind you guys my Kickstarter has 26 days left. We have 26 days left to go, which is just under 4 weeks to try and reach our backer goal this year, which is 1,367. And right now we are at 518 backers, like I said, with 26 days to go. So if you haven't pitched in yet, I really appreciate your support. And when you do, the link to the Kickstarter is in the description of this video. It's also in the comments section to this video. Things slowed down a little bit over the weekend. They usually do. So we're trying to pick the pace back up today and see if we can push forward to 600 this week. We're almost halfway there with a couple weeks, about 3.5 weeks left. When you pledge to support this channel, you can pick up a variety of different rewards. So there's all different kinds of exclusive video lectures that I do. There is an exclusive video on the astrology of 2022. It's sort of like a deep dive into all of the big astrology of the year ahead. There is also a year ahead horoscope reading, which gives you the entire year in depth for your sun or rising sign. And there's a bunch of other really cool stuff. There's horary questions you can ask, a bundle of them. And then the best thing is definitely you can save 50% off any of my online courses. If you want to come and study with me sometime in 2022 or beyond, you can use them as credits. If you can't take it in 2022 for whatever reason, you can use it in 2023. But you can attend any of my online courses, including my Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic course, which starts in June and November of 2022. Or you can buy a bundle and take several of my classes, year 1, year 2, the horary program, and my Readings and Passages course. All of those are 1-year programs. They're in-depth dives into Hellenistic astrology, teach you how to read birth charts, bring this language of astrology to a whole new level in your life. So you can pick up those and you save 50% off or even $400 cheaper than our early bird discount. So it's a great way to save. And you can also support your favorite astrology channel, or at least I hope I'm up there. So all of the money that we raise from this Kickstarter, it goes to support me and my family. It's a big part of how I earn my living as an astrologer. So I really appreciate your patronage. I support a staff. There's 10 total people on my staff that help me with all sorts of stuff. 2 people that are really critical to making sure I can do this every day. About half of my day is spent creating these videos, from all the prep work that goes into it, my morning meditation practice, just getting myself in the right state, and then sitting down, doing the research. You can't see on my screen right here. I've got all my notes for today's talk down, bookmarks, some usually the I Ching maybe that I've cast and spent time with. So there's a lot of love and time that goes into creating these videos. If you guys aren't able to donate and support, you can always support by just praying for this channel. That's always appreciated. You can always click the like button or subscribe, or click on the notifications icon, little bell, anything like that, or just share it with other people. That helps the channel grow as well. So thank you guys. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to bring up the real-time clock, and we're going to take a look at Mercury's square to Neptune. So you can see Mercury here is in Sagittarius and is moving into the square with Neptune. There's Neptune in Pisces. Now the sun is also going to move through the square to Neptune later in the week. So this is a transit that is some of the themes that I'm going to talk about today. You'll really be feeling for the entire week when considering the fact that by Sunday of this week, thereabouts, the sun will also push through a square to Neptune, and many of the same themes will just be repeating themselves. But let's look at how this plays out. So today's Monday, December 6th. We go forward to tomorrow, December 7th, Tuesday, and you can see Mercury is pushed through the square exactly at the 20th degree. And then by Wednesday, it's already at the 22nd degree. So you're about a 3-degree range. So you probably by Wednesday, you'll be really having felt the effects of this particular transit. Now, the other thing that is happening that's interesting is Mercury will also be going into a sextile with Jupiter with reception because it's in Jupiter's sign. You can see that by Saturday. And also by Saturday, you can see that Venus and Pluto are getting together in their conjunction. So it's just a really big week. We have a lot of stuff going on this week, a lot of big aspects coming through. Also, kind of exciting news, at least for me anyway, is you're going to see Mars change signs and go into Jupiter's domicile. Now, Mars doesn't have bad dignity in Scorpio. It's in its own sign. But I've just found in general that Mars in Sag, or Mars in a Jupiter ruled sign, I should say, when it has reception to Jupiter, can be very uplifting and positive in terms of just providing a lift, especially given the heaviness of the Venus-Pluto dynamic. So that's a little bit about where the astrology is heading this week. If we look back right now, the moon cycle today, you may also notice that today, in particular, you're starting to get a taste for that Venus-Pluto dynamic this week as the moon is going to go through Venus and Pluto. So today would also be a good day in the background. It just kind of, you might be getting a little bit of foreshadowing today with the moon going right over Venus and Pluto, and that will happen today into early tomorrow morning. So like if I just go forward, let's just say I go forward one day, you're going to see that by tomorrow morning, the moon's just pulling into Aquarius right there. So between now and tomorrow morning, you're getting that preview of Venus and Pluto by virtue of the fact that the moon is going over it. All right, let's talk about this archetypal combination. Okay, you have Neptune, which is a planet that has this kind of sublime, romantic, imaginative quality. It can be a very mystical planet. It can also be a planet that can sweep us up in emotionality and we can lose rationality. It's a planet that can sweep us up in fantasies and delusions. And there's a big difference between let's call it the active power of imagination, the mood of religious, spiritual, or artistic inspiration, and that of delusions of grandeur or illusions or intoxication, all kind of contained, all possibilities contained in Neptune as well. Neptune is also a planet that tends to amplify for us the distinction between the mundane and the transcendental. The mundane and the transcendental, in a sense, are both spiritual, but we can make this kind of dichotomy where, like, for example, let's say one of the most common things that I see in my practice as an astrologer, right? People coming and they'll come into a reading and they'll say that some area of their life is either boring or uninspiring or feels dead. And then there'll be a longing for something else. For example, sometimes it's when some area of our life is feeling dead, we may long for a new job or a new partner, or we may long for, we may long to travel because we're bored staying at home. Whatever the case might be, it's not necessarily that there isn't, it's Neptune may amplify the feeling of something being kind of dead or dry. And it's not that that's false, but sometimes the choice that we'll make or the impulse that we'll have to reanimate some part of our life that feels dead will be problematic. For example, the classic one with Venus Neptune. I'm going to look for someone else because maybe my relationship is dry or boring or something like that. Or maybe it's not giving me what I need at the moment. And so I'll go looking for something else rather than talking to, the person I love. Or there could, and of course, then what a person will often find out is that they'll then project unrealistic fantasies onto a romantic attraction at work or something, right? And then if they pursue that fantasy, depending on how far it goes, they may ruin their current relationship before giving it a chance to address whatever the issues may be, or they will find out through pursuing it too far that this was a fantasy and not real, and now they're left with maybe infidelity or something like that. So you can see this in many places in work too. Someone will say, my job is boring, so I'm going to go and become a Reiki practitioner and make a living doing that. And then they go try to do that and they realize it's hard to make a living doing Reiki or whatever the case might be. So oftentimes it's not that the impulse itself is wrong. It's not that there isn't an area of life that feels sort of dead or dry. It's that the imagined solution is because it's coming from the amplified feelings of boredom or dissatisfaction, will provide us with some solution that is not grounded. So that's one thing that you have to watch for with Neptune transits, because I've seen it more times than I can count. Now, that's all just sort of Neptune's territory. Neptune can also, so illusions, disillusionment, but Neptune is also about the need to go back to the well of human imagination or religious experience or romance or intuition and subtlety and sensuality, and to try to touch those qualities, because we really can feel quite dead inside unless the world is teeming with gods and metaphors and dreams and myths and poetry and dance and song and hidden meanings. And we need that kind of nuance in our lives. And Neptune is often the planet that provides it. So it's hard to say, is Neptune a traditional sort of benefic or malefic type of planet? It certainly is a planet, for example, that I've seen more times than I can count come up with addiction. But it's also a planet that I've seen in many instances provide people with some kind of portal through which a spiritual lifestyle appears, or a teacher that's very important or something like that. So it's a really interesting planet. Anyway, Mercury, the planet getting into the square with Neptune this week, is a planet of speech and mind, technology and communication. It tends to be more on the rational side, but Mercury is also a planet that is known as a trickster. So, for example, Mercury sometimes appears when there's like messages that need to come to us through interesting experiences. Sometimes things happen in a really random way. Things appear very random and sort of chaotic, and yet we trip and stumble through some kind of unexpected chaos to find that there's like a divine riddle or message at the heart of it. So that kind of happenstance, twists and turns of Mercury can be very chaotic. For example, it rules the two signs that usher us into the dark parts of the year. The yin is kind of taking over in the zodiacal round, and Gemini and Virgo, where the darkness is starting to come back, or the darkness takes over. Darkness meaning the disintegrating of something that's held, whether it's an idea or a season in life or a mood. Mercury takes things apart. So when things fall apart, there's chaos. We usually think of chaos as the enemy of meaning and order, but actually there's like a secret dyad between the two of them. Zeus, the cosmic, the planet of cosmic order and unity and cohesiveness, and Mercury, the trickster god of disintegration and chaos. These two gods are two sides of the same coin, And so when you think about Mercury in particular, Hermes, and Neptune coming together, you're not just thinking about rationality versus the romantic or mystical. That's one dichotomy that's there. But you're also thinking about the way in which you can find yourself in some kind of chaotic situation that was unexpected or unplanned. And, it's like a ball of yarn. You have to untangle it. And suddenly, when you do that, you find out that there's a message at the center of it. I was this past weekend, I was visiting my sister in North Carolina, and I had to go through the airport. It's my first time flying since COVID. And I was at the airport. My ticket said seat assigned at gate. And it was weird because I thought, well, I have a seat. I don't know why they're assigning it at the gate. And anyway, I ended up in the very back of the airplane, like the very back last row, which was apparently had nobody else in it, and they had reserved it. And for some reason, I don't know, they must have overbooked the flight or something, but they saved the back row. So I ended up in the very back row of the plane, all completely by myself. And here's the thing, this is really funny. I had been really paranoid, about I don't want to get sick. I'm worried about being on an airplane. Probably more paranoid than anything, right? Because you got to wear a mask and the whole thing. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm probably safe, whatever. So my mind is worried mostly not for myself, but about giving it to my kids or my wife. My wife has asthma, so I'm like, I just don't want to get her sick or whatever. So, and my worst fears, are like getting on a plane, going to see my baby sister who has a new baby, or like giving it to her new baby. You know what I mean? Like, so I had these worries in the back of my mind. And then I get stuck in the very back of the plane, right? It was there was nobody there whatsoever. And it was the funniest thing because, right or wrong, I just was like, oh, man. I mean, it's kind of nice because I feel now like a little bit more, I guess, isolated. So maybe a little bit more protected from germs or something. But then my honest heart response was like, oh, it's been so long since I've sat on an airplane near other human beings. So I was just like, it was such a trickstery moment where I was isolated and felt safe, but also disconnected from other people, and realizing how much I missed that and how maybe it was worth the risk. And that, I felt like, for me, was just a little microcosm of what the past couple of years have been like in terms of the need for human interaction versus the worry, fear, sometimes paranoia about getting sick. And I'm not talking about what other people should be feeling or thinking. Let's be clear. I'm just talking about my own process. And at any rate, as I was sitting there going like, this is such an interesting, like, it's like a little microcosm. And I started thinking, what's going on in the sky right now? Like, this feels like something. It feels like a planet. You know what I mean? You get that feeling sometimes. You're like, this feels like a planet. Someone's pulling my strings. Who's grabbed me? And I pulled up my phone, pull up my cell phone, and I use an app, by the way. If you're ever looking for an app for your cell phone, I use Astro Gold on my phone, and I really like it as just like a simple app that lets me pull things up and look. So anyway, I pulled up Astro Gold as we're sitting there getting ready to leave, and I noticed that Mercury was applying to Neptune. And I was like, that's perfect. That is exactly the kind of wink, wink nod from Mercury and Neptune that I would expect. And then it led to a number of other insights while I was spending the weekend with my sister. So I wrote some of them down, and I'm just going to go through some of the archetypal combinations in general in a minute here. So I promise to spare you from my personal storytelling after this. But there are two stories that I want to share with you. One, being in my sister's home and celebrating the birth of her, her new daughter. Her daughter's name really is literally Nova, which I believe means new. Anyway, I'm the older brother, right? And growing up, I think it's just maybe it's just me and I was just like a jerk, but I think it's the case probably for a lot of sibling dynamics where there's like an older and a younger. There's just the two of us. And I just realized how I have tended to be more of the center of attention, like when I was younger, like when we were kids, that I tended to fill up the room and my sister was like sort of um not like intentionally living in, I never tried to like intentionally make her like live in the shadow, but like I definitely was, because I was like coming of age and accomplishing things and blah blah blah, and when she was a little bit younger and stuff like that, it just occurred to me that, like older siblings can sometimes just sort of hog the light. They can sort of stand in the light and be the center of attention, and sometimes younger siblings sort of live in that shadow for a while. And I did my sister, is her partner from is Indian. They're actually from Zambia, but they're Indian family, and his mother and father lived with them. So, by the way, another thing that was really funny was that throughout the weekend, his mother makes the most amazing, she's like, I want to say Gujarati. And so she makes like the most amazing food. And I'm not sure where Gujarati is in India, if it's North India or anyway, if you're out there and let me know. But made the most amazing food all weekend. And also, it was very Mercury Neptune, where there was very like it was very, very hard for me to keep and communicate boundaries with regard to how much I could eat. Like she just kept putting food on my plate, which was really amazing. And I felt like I would be offensive if I said no, because she just kept piling it up. She was so happy. She was so happy to see me just like eating this. And it was because it was amazing food. And I was so happy and it was so good. But then she just kept putting it on. And then I felt like I couldn't say no. And it was very Mercury Neptune too. Anyway, so at any rate, that was a big part of the weekend as well. But at any rate, I kept thinking to myself throughout the weekend, it just was such a clear moment of letting my sister really be in the middle and being like, wow, this is my sister's like, so she's come into her own so much the past. She had a son last year, and then little over a year later, has a daughter. And these are just her times to shine. It was the first time I'd seen her new home, and really just seen her as like the matriarch of her house, and like it was just beautiful. And I felt myself needing to like occupying a different psychic space where listening was really important, and making sure she was in the light was really important. But it wasn't that like it was that hard for me. We're grown, and we've had much more of a reciprocal dynamic for a long time. But I just became so aware of how easy it is to, even if you're not talking, to feel like you're the center psychically of a space when you're sharing it with people, and how good and how relieving it feels to actually intentionally move yourself away from that center and let other people be at that center or take turns or whatever. And, I'm a Taurus rising, Venus and Leo. It's very easy for Leo types to be like even if it's just in your own head, to be like the gravitational center of the universe, So, but I thought about a few things, because one of the things that's actually talked about quite commonly is the communication dynamics with Mercury Neptune. It was obviously growing over the weekend while I was there. And one of the things that I thought about was the way in which listening becomes so important. For example, there's a few benefits that happen when we take ourselves out of the psychic center. Now, the psychic center doesn't mean that you're just the one doing the talking. That's one way that we might put ourselves at the psychic center in a room with other people, right? We might be sharing space with other people, and we might find ourselves at the psychic center because we're talking or we're sharing a story or something like that, or something about us is being discussed. It's not just listening to other people as opposed to talking. There's also something, it's a little subtler than that. And it just struck me as very Mercury Neptune that we actually stop thinking about ourselves in like one of the things I remember I did I was when I was younger, I was a camp counselor, and we had to learn, go through different kind of communication training and stuff like that for working at a camp all summer. And I remember one of the things that stuck with me was if you're listening to someone and you're anticipating what you're going to say and just waiting for the moment when you can speak and say what you're going to say, then you may not really be listening. And I think it's a little bit like that, to take ourselves out of being the psychic center. We have to listen so deeply that we are really not anticipating how what is being said relates to us. How does it come back to me? How do I respond? Even though there's a place for that, like it's very exciting. Like I have friends and we're talking and it's like a ping pong game, and it's really fluid and fun. But there's also something so relieving, isn't there, about listening so deeply, and that there's no sense of how does this relate back to me? There's no response being planned or jumping off the tip of my tongue. So one thing to think about this week and over the next few days is, how do we take ourselves out of the psychic center and let someone else be there, or let something else be there? I don't know if there's any other way of describing how one can be successful, for example, at mantra meditation, unless the mantra becomes the center. One of the instructions that you'll hear gurus giving is, while you're chanting the mantra, you should be listening to the sound of your own voice chanting the mantra. In other words, the mantra itself should become the focus. You should be hearing the mantra. The mantra should become the gravitational center. If I had any way of describing what a good day of mantra meditation is like, it's when the mantra becomes the center, and it is so relieving to take myself, my concerns, my existence, my problems, my joys, all of it, and just move it out to the periphery and let these holy names of God dwell in the center for just a little bit every day. That is so relieving for me. There's many mantra practices around the world, the rosary. I mean, there's so many prayers that can be said in repetition, but it's something about shifting away from being at the center. You might say, well, what does that have to do with Mercury Neptune? But Mercury Neptune is a very careful and sensitive and empathetic listener. And in order to be really empathetic, in order to really listen, in order to really move into that space of care and concern for others, we have to sort of take ourselves, not just verbally and not just mentally, but sort of psychically, and say, I'm just not going to be the gravitational center around which everything else orbits, just for a little bit. It's not like it's a sin to feel like we're at the center, because but just to be able to have movement. I'm at the center now, someone else is at the center. And it doesn't relate back to me immediately in some kind of swift reaction. How is this calibrated within my head and so forth? It's a weight that gets lifted and help that can actually be given. One of the most beneficial forms of help is listening. I heard this one time from one of my spiritual teachers. There was a study that was done that there's two of them. One had to do with hearing your own name. Like if someone says your own name, that there's sort of nothing more joyful than hearing the sound of someone actually use and say your own name. And the other one was, I don't know if that was a study or not, but I believe that's true. The other one was a study, and it showed people going into a room with like two different types of interviewers. The first interviewer, there was a lot of back and forth. And the first interviewer would talk about themselves and talk about the other person and ask questions, but they would talk about themselves. The second interviewer would ask questions and ask more questions and ask more questions and get really engaged and interested in the person that they were talking to. And they didn't say anything about themselves. They barely spoke outside of asking questions and meaningful and interesting follow-up questions. And afterward, they asked these people who'd been interviewed to respond to their interviewer. And it was like overwhelmingly, the people who interviewed with the person who asked questions and didn't say anything really, but just kept asking questions, meaningful questions, that they came out and said that was the most interesting person. because because a lot of what makes us valuable, like a lot of what becomes very appealing about us, if we want love, attention, respect, a lot of the way that we gain that from other people is not so much by what we say or what we do, or the kind of merit that we can hope to get from someone else, but it's what oftentimes attracts people to us is the ability that we have to ask questions and to really listen. There's something about that allows people to feel seen and heard. And it's interesting that someone could be so selfless as to care that much and ask such interesting questions and draw me out. Me, why would you ask me questions? Thank you. So we can receive the joy of other people, just their presence, and just really deeply enjoying the existence of other people by making other people, even just for little spurts of time, the center of attention, to really listen, to really ask questions, to draw them out. People feel so seen. And then interestingly, they walk away going, who is that? That was a really interesting person. It's because people who have that skill and that ability to us are interesting. We are drawn and attracted, not just selfishly. I don't believe that's just because, well, I got to hear myself talk, so aren't they interesting? That might be part of it. But it also has to do with the fact that we naturally find it attractive when other human beings can move out of the center and let other people shine in the center. And again, I just kept thinking about this over the weekend when I just thought how good it felt and how far we've come since we were younger. And I was sort of like the dominant, like 18-year-old Venus with Venus and Leo, you know what I mean? And like how my sister, I didn't know yet. I was too immature and sort of selfish to know how to let my sister be at the center. And just this weekend, noticing that dynamic and also recognizing, because they have a very beautiful puja room in their house. And so I got to do my japa over the weekend in the puja room. And I just kept thinking, I wouldn't be able to do this at this stage in my life if it weren't for talking to thousands of people in their astrology charts and developing this deep love for hearing other people's stories, and the mantra and mantra meditation, which is teaching me little by little how good it feels to let something else be at the center. That I don't know what it means to be at the center unless I know how to really deeply enjoy other people being at the center. And these are the subtleties of Mercury, Neptune. Mercury, Neptune can really revel in the tranquility of listening. Mercury, Neptune has so much to do with the enjoyment that we receive in listening to other people. There's another story I want to share with you guys. When I started learning Hellenistic astrology, I studied with an astrologer, not like formally, but named Robert Schmidt, and he lived not far from me in Maryland. And I went and visited with him several times. And then I ended up being there when he was passing. By chance, I went out to visit with them to talk astrology, and I got there and they weren't answering the door. And I called his wife's cell phone. It turns out he had just had a stroke and was in the hospital, and would end up being his deathbed. He was ready to pass. And I was there, and I had this perception, I'll never forget it. Mercury was squaring Neptune, and Mercury was squaring Neptune from Sagittarius to Pisces, just as it is now. And basically, I was aware of what everyone in the room was talking about at once. Like it was like some weird way in which I could just kind of perceive all of it. What is this perception coming in that I can just feel like I'm perceiving all of it? And I suddenly realized, because I was sitting next to Bob, he had a stroke and he couldn't speak. And he couldn't move. He had some paralysis. He could move one hand. And he was at times responsive and able to say, yes, I can hear everybody in the room by lifting his hand when they would ask. At any rate, so everyone was talking about how tragic it was and how upsetting it was that he wouldn't be able to continue some of his work. And and I just thought, he is laying there, and people in this room, not intentionally or maliciously or anything like that, but people have forgotten at this moment that he can hear all of this, and that people are talking about the medical stuff, and it's so tragic that he can't finish some of his great work that he still had in him astrologically, and just discussing plans. And there were moments when you could tell that everyone was suddenly remembering that he was there and could hear, even though it in some ways looked like he was already gone. And I'm not saying I was a hero or anything, but it was just like in this moment, I could just almost like put myself in his space and be like, wow, you're getting ready to pass out of your body. What would it be like to hear all of this right now? To really deeply, deeply take it in. You have no choice but to take it in, right? And then I ended up reciting in Sanskrit some of the Bhagavad Gita for him and doing a little bit of mantra meditation near him where he lay. But I'll never ever forget thinking that there was this weird way in which he had in his passing, he was being afforded this ability to hear and see so many things, just so porous, having to take it all in so deeply and unable to speak or respond. And this is a guy who was a prolific writer and thinker and speaker. And I can't explain what it did for me, but it just deeply opened my heart. And I kept thinking, this listening is what we all do when we pass through this world. There's a way in which, like, if you guys remember in A Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge has the perception of people talking about him in the present and in the future, even at his own death. And he has to take it all in this really deep way. Isn't it interesting that perspective, it seems like you need, what do you need to be like out of your body? Do you need to be lying on your deathbed? Do you need to have spirits take you during the middle of your dreams and show you? There are metaphors, right? They're all metaphors for the same thing that Mercury, Neptune is pointing us toward, which is just sit back and listen and take it in, take in the vastness of what's actually there. And you can do it, if any of us can, if we sit back and develop a practice of listening to what else is speaking, what other is speaking aside from ourselves. Not that we aren't important, but that we can get into this practice. And then it's like the real things that want to communicate with us, that want to have a relationship with us, start speaking. And this is really one of the only ways that it turns out that people also will find us interesting, beautiful, valuable. It's not so much by what we say or do or what merit we gain, as it is to how deeply we're able to listen and how deeply we're able to create space for others. That's what fundamentally draws others to us. Okay, so I wanted to share the stories with you guys. Mercury square Neptune. You think about peaceful mindedness, kind of tranquil vibrations, intuition. You think about fluid, associative, symbolic thinking. If I'm doing good work as an astrologer and fluidly connecting symbols around the chart, it's very Mercury Neptune. There's a lot of lessons that come up related to boundaries in speech or mind. What is appropriate to say or not say, where our mind goes, what we associate with, what kind of results or what it creates. all sorts of issues around honesty, clarity, deception, all sorts of potential mishaps in communication. Something as mundane as spilling water on your keyboard can be very Mercury, Neptune. The importance of subjectivity as its own oracular process. What I feel, what I think is not just some subjective emotional thing. My subjective interior experience is itself some kind of omen, but also the way that subjectivity can lead to distortions of facts, the blessing and beauty of uncertainty, glossing over or making up things, hyperbole, exaggeration, little white lies, secret plans, and gossip. Also, the tendency to get caught in some kind of mystical woo-woo, especially those that get like delusional. It was this exact transit last year, Mercury, Neptune, that coincided with someone, one of my YouTube viewers, believing that they believed that they were Jesus and that I was a disciple of theirs, and they wanted me to use my YouTube channel to spread their message, and then they ended up taking their own life. So you can get these crazy, mystical, theatrical sense of power and special capabilities and stuff like that. That was a devastating experience. But also the importance of chanting, subtleties, listening for signs, clues, and dreams. So Mercury, Neptune. I would love to hear your stories. If you want to share a story, use the hashtag grabbed. How are you seeing Mercury, Neptune? Is it something really mundane and funny, like a ballpoint pen exploded in my cup of water? Or is it is it something else? Is it a deeper realization? So share your stories. Use the hashtag grabbed and put Mercury square Neptune. Share your story. Maybe we'll get some good ones to share in an upcoming episode. If you prefer to share it privately, you can use the email address grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Remember, we are pushing towards 600 backers. So today we are at 518 backers. We're trying to get to 1,367 with just 26 days left to go. So we got to make some strong pushes here, gain your support. There's over 40,000 people who subscribe to this channel. So we're trying to get just over, a little over 1,000 of you out there to pitch in and become patrons of this channel. If you're able to, any and every donation helps. Pick up a class, come study with me in the year ahead. I'd love to see more people in the classes in 2022. If you're in one of my classes, you can also get an advanced class. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. And we have lots more astrology to unpack this week, so I look forward to it. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.